Hello, we got this. We're
Hello.
gonna go. I was trying not to be delayed because I know that when they did their announcement with the provincial government, they were delayed a little bit, and I was like, "Come on, guys! You had 9 o'clock on the button, 1:30 on the button. Here I am delayed." So I guess I got to apologize for them muttering underneath my breath, waiting for these housing announcements that recently came out back to back, 2 days in a row. Definitely tried to do my best to let the community know about what these announcements were going to be somewhat about. And we were a little bit hopeful. But then there was a lot of landlords that are like, I'm not holding my breath. And we good thing we didn't hold our breath. I can say that. So I thought, who else better to come on and have this nice discussion about Bill 97 that's been proposed. Obviously, it's going to be gone through the first read as of April 6th here in Ontario. And that's going to obviously give it's supposed to be a balanced approach, providing, support for landlords and tenants. So we're going to have Andrew Choubeta. He's with Choubeta Paralegal Services. So he is going to be the guy to be like, hey, what could potentially happen with these little changes that they came out with? But are they enough? Are they enough? And they are certainly not enough to deal with the backlog at the Landlord Tenant Board, and certainly not providing justice to landlords nor tenants. Andrew, your first comment, like one statement of your first when you heard all the announcements coming out. What did you think?
Well, flatly speaking, inadequate. Inadequate. That's the first
Mm,
thing I thought, right? Like if we're doing a mix up, a change up on the new laws, like and we're shielding ourselves from the truth here, right? The main issue that we're dealing with is just the backlog. And what they're doing is, I have to, you know, concede some points where, they are throwing more money at the topic and more money for adjudicators and part-time adjudicators and full-time adjudicators, which is great, right? We're getting some more traction.
yeah, they
But
just have evening hearings. They got weekend hearings now, which is,
yeah, which is great. Like I've not gotten one of those evening hearings yet. I sincerely hope that I do for a lot of my clients, but the backlog is still there. And back in the earlier days of the Landlord Tenant Board, hearings were convened within 2 months, and orders were drafted within 2 weeks, right? And then now we're seeing this significant wait time, and throwing more money at the subject. Yeah, we do need more board members, but we need more staff at the board, right? Which is it's a pretty big thing that we're needing for the clerking, and they don't really make any reference to that in the actual documentation. They're
yep.
most, I think, I started laughing when I read it. They said that they were hiring 5 staff members. That's it,
5.
5, and
Thank
they're
you.
indicators. And I went, these poor clerks, right? That you can't even get over on the phone. And then even when you're trying to get a hold of the board, it's next to impossible sometimes. So
Well,
having additional,
Andrew, if we have the money and people were excited, right? Some other groups were talking about the excitement, saying $6.5 million is obviously a lot of money to be throwing 40 adjudicators, but they've also given 4.5 million over that 3-year period. Then they gave 1.4 to hire more adjudicators and more staff. And if you see what was given prior to the 6.5, hasn't made a difference. They spent 28.4 million just to bring this online. So we're throwing a lot of money at the Landlord and Tenant Board. And yes, you needed the more adjudicators because they did, they weren't hiring. There was like a freeze on the hiring, which is obviously got them in a pickle, not having anyone as an adjudicator, and then the delay of trying to train these adjudicators. So we can get all the adjudicators into that board and evening, weekends, and weekend hearings. But when these adjudicators are acting the way they are in their hearings, adjourning these type of applications or dragging these hearings on or guiding the tenants into a situation where it's given them a hint on what they could bring up for their case to try to get the hearing either delayed or get it dismissed, and accepting evidence at the time of hearing when it's supposed to be given 7 days. So we can load it all we want with the board members, but there's no consistency with these type of adjudicators.
And you know what? I love that statement, consistency. And my colleague Glenn always says the same thing over and over more. You can always count on the Landlord and Tenant Board to be consistently inconsistent. That is what you can 100% count on, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, what's that adage from Whose Line Is It Anyway? And they don't matter as well. And it's similar to that as well, right? Like, there are strict rules in the Landlord Tenant Board, and we find a lot of time that they don't listen to those rules, right? Their own rules and precedents and all these other things. And it catches people a little bit far back when that does happen. And ultimately speaking, we can take these steps of trying to alleviate this backlog, but ultimately the overhaul is still going to be there. That needs to be done. And I have to say, like, it's great that we're seeing these new adjudicators. It's great, but it's going to take time so that we can see an experience level there. It's going to take a few years, right?
If you look at what they're saying, how much money they've given, what they're giving now, and even through the mouth of Doug Downey, the Attorney General, stating that he can't give a timeline on when this backlog is going to be addressed. If you're throwing this type of money, you need to be able to have a plan in place to say, hey, we're going to give you this. We're asking for this 6.5 million, and this is we're going to be able to do with this 6.5 million. They never done that. And even for Steve Clark talking about this money is also going to come into changes to come up with a common payment agreement form. And I'm like, whoa, hold the horse, buddy. Like, have you not been on the Landlord and Tenant Board website? Have you not seen that form that says payment agreement? Like, do you not know this? Like, should we educate him? And it doesn't give us much hope knowing that the own Minister of Housing didn't even know that there was a payment agreement form. Like, come on.
It doesn't bode. I got to be honest, Kayla, it doesn't bode well. Does not bode well whatsoever, right?
No.
And like the issues at the top are trickling down to the bottom, right? And you see this, like, I sincerely hope I see more of my colleagues in the Landlord and Tenant Board. I sincerely hope we see significant more lawyers in the Landlord and Tenant Board becoming adjudicators and paralegals and members of the housing and then landlords, etc. But we're seeing community appointments, which is great as well. But we need some structure and some rulings here that stay consistent, right? And that's when not me as a licensee or a paralegal, but me as a citizen, I would like to see that more, right? Where we're remaining consistent throughout the process with a lot of these adjudicators, and we're just not seeing that yet, right? And
when you hear, go ahead.
Yeah, so like if this was the case, and we can see a standard operating practice with these adjudicators, that would be the best bet. But yeah, I think as of right now, that's a pipe dream. Right, that's not something that we can have in the next 10 years. I really honestly don't see that happening. And I see, like, the way this trend is going, where we're doing this is politically bad for us, and so we're going to throw more money at the subject to see if it fixes it. It's just not going to work. No. Right? There needs to be a consistent overhaul on what's happening, so we can eventually get to a place in Ontario where landlords are heard, and tenants as well, but our issues are heard on an expedited manner, right? And I would be honestly, Kayla, I would be fine with inconsistent rulings if the process was quicker. If an inconsistent ruling comes out and it could be appealed in 4 weeks, or a new application started in a month or two, and we're not seeing a landlord go out $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 in damages and loss of payment of rent and additional costs and legal fees, like, that would be consistently better. I would be fine with the rulings that they're giving now if things took 2 months. But the problem is that it's not. It's taking 12, 13, 8, 9. So that's the issue. And even looking at the board's metrics on their own applications, it's still lackluster. So I can't be, maybe I'm being a little bit rigid on this, but I can't be motivated in thinking that this is going to be a solution until such time that I can see consistent changes where that backlog and the time of filing, the time of actual scheduling is quicker. And the biggest like pet peeve that I have is that the board brought out the new system where you would be able to select your hearing dates. They brought that out, right?
Yep.
And I've been on the receiving end of that. I've gotten those notifications, right? And what I don't understand is how we're spending millions of dollars in the system and we don't have an automatic scheduling system at the time of filing.
Yeah. Mm.
I really don't. I really don't understand that.
Even for the system that they built in, they have your portal, they have a section for the mediation, and you have to examine, like, I'm at, like, thanks for the 6.5 mil, guys. It is taxpayers' money, and taxpayers should be upset with the fact that it's inefficient to why they're just funding it and not looking at the process, utilizing that portal, understanding the mediation is there for the tenant and the landlord to communicate with each other and say, hey, you haven't paid rent in 9 months. Are you planning to make a payment plan? Yes or no? Okay, now we're going to say, hey guys, they're not wanting to make a payment plan. Let's get this expedited because this person's now 6 months into arrears. This is not someone who's hard up and not needing a hand up. They're just looking for a hand out, and they're not being able to push that. And if you look at what is backlogging the landlord tenant board, it's the non-payment of rent applications. So if you can streamline that approach, make it more administrative process in order to reach out to the tenant by email, by phone, to say, hey, have you made a payment plan? What kind of payment plan are we looking at? That's what our proposal was to the government, was to say, hey, let's give our N4 application. The tenants now have 14 days to reply to the board within the portal to say that they've made a payment or they made a payment plan, or why Section 83 applies to them, that would to grant them a hearing. And also, when this notification had went out to the tenants to say your landlord had filed an application against you, it should also come with that link that connects those tenants to local service managers, where the government, the provincial government, has now given $2.2 million to the homeless and prevention programs. So tying the landlord and tenant board services into that before people even need to have a hearing is going to be key into keeping people in their homes. And that's the thing that people are not seeing, like what homelessness has grown into, and how it's a massive crisis across the country. You see what's happening in Vancouver right now, where people are taking the city's taking the tents off the streets. And there's nowhere else for these people to go. So understanding why landlords are not investing in Ontario, they think it's the red tape, it's just the development charges. No, it's the borrowing power, it's the type of properties that are available, the price that's on there. But most importantly, when you can realize that you have 12 months that you can have someone in your unit without paying rent, why are these landlords going to stay here in Ontario? They're going to start exploring other opportunities. And I can tell you, our landlords are doing it. They're in Texas, they're in Florida, they're in Belize, Costa Rica. I'm now hearing Thailand is the place for people to go. So when landlords are leaving the province with their money, I don't see them wanting to be doing. We have 1.5 million homes in the bucket now where it's been approved. They're just not built yet, and they're not questioning why these properties are not getting built. And no one is talking about immigration. We have over 107,000 people that came into Ontario alone last year, and we are they were proud that they issued 15,000 units last year. Like, I don't know how we get a new minister on this, but someone needs to come back in and tell them this is not working, their process is not working, and it's inefficient to be funding the landlord and tenant board with no game plan. So we can say, let's hope for the best. Let's hope that we got that 6.5 and it's going to get these adjudicators trained, ready to go, and understand that there is people abusing the system. But hey, we're the ones with boots on the ground, and unfortunately, they just want to keep dealing with developers. And guess what? They're not going to reach their 1.5 million homes before 2031. I can guarantee you that.
Guarantee not at all. Right? And I, you know what? I'll for a second play the other side, and I know what the response to that is going to be. the response to, landlords leaving the market is all obviously going to be good. Absolutely, we don't want them here anyways, right? We want more stock for rent, right? But that's a very foolish thought. And the reason why is because who else is going to occupy those properties and maintain them? Who else is going to be providing that service, right? And this is the thing. Let's not look at something odd. Let's not look at something different. Ultimately speaking, we've seen these in other countries. We've seen this happen in the Nordic countries. We've seen this happen in Europe, right? Where all these landlords left the market, and then there was no more rentals, and people did not want to rent out those properties. And you had people lining up outside a street just to take a look at a showing of a one-bedroom apartment, and the prices increased, right? And it's like, and the thought that, well, why would a landlord look at a property and a sense of a business, which to this day I don't understand as to how people can't grasp that subject and that concept when you're looking at a 20-unit building. Who else is going to buy that? Who is going to maintain it? Who's going to take care of it? Who's going to make sure it doesn't turn into a slum? And if they don't get the profit back, why would you not take your money and go to Belize? Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
there's provinces, Andrew, who are selling off their housing stock, like the city-owned properties, because they can't maintain them. Look at what Toronto housing has become. When funding gets issued, they're like, yay, we have money for maintenance. Like, this is not to build, it's just to cover it. So this is why we keep originating that taxpayers cannot afford to keep building, managing, and maintaining and subsidizing government rent. And we talk to our shelters, we talk to people who are running these social agencies and be like, why are you looking at, private landlords? Oh, because they need private landlords to help get people in their house, because there's a 12-year waiting list just for government housing alone. They need to get that supply. And who else better? Like, why wouldn't the government want to be a joint venture partner with private investors? Give us the tools that we need to get that supply happening. But with all the renovations that landlords would need to do to make sure that the places are clean, to kind of create that secondary suite, maybe to demolish it so that they can build more. That's where the numbers need to make sense for these investors, especially when they buy a duplex and say, okay, I'm buying the property at this, I can't put my rents to this. It might be, let's demo it so we can build more units to make the numbers work. But now with the new changes that are happening, they want to make it more difficult for people to issue notice to their tenant and say, hey, you need to leave. Now, they said that it had to be a qualified person. We don't know if that's going to be someone from the city. We don't know if that's going to be a building inspector, or if it's going to be somebody that we get to choose. And hey, buddy, like, can you write me something up there just to say the tenant has to leave? Like, obviously it's going to be, but this has always been a process, permit, no permit. You're just making it like, it's almost like smoke and mirrors that they're doing, because we've always needed that. They just want to put that extra red tape in there to say that you need to have this document. And if you don't have this document, when you finally do get to the board, your application is going to be voided, right? So it's going to make them start the process all over again.
What I'm seeing these days, like I haven't been practicing for 50 years, but I've been around since the sort of start of the M13 change, Bill 184, and the previous legislation. And initially, you had to just meet the test of the M13 to have it.
Oh, you're going choppy on us.
Right? And then it continued. And then in addition to that, it continued. And then now we're seeing this significant red tape where we're having consistent issues getting these applications through the Landlord Tenant Board. And it doesn't look like there's an end in sight, where there's just going to be more problems of landlords getting their applications through their ability to renovate the properties. And the board's understanding on what needs to be renovated is different from what a regular landlord would consider. You can have properties that look very much like slums, and the Landlord Tenant Board will quietly say, well, it just doesn't need to be repaired because it's not needed. Right? And we're seeing that over and over again. And ultimately, it's a shame. But, like it's just a lot more red tape that is, because frankly speaking, not needed.
Now, the N13, that would follow with an L2 application, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And the L2 applications to last year were coming in at 13,852, but that could also be for personal use applications as well. So there's not really many applications that are being brought to the board for the renovations, that people are evictions for renovictions, but they're making a big muck about it in the media to make it look like it's something that landlords are doing, and they might be verbally not issuing the form and not having to go through the board, but you can't blame them. This is the symptom of rent control. This is why you keep putting up all the landlords' fees. How are you supposed to get them to run it as a business if you're capping them on how much they can make, but you're not capping all the other expenses that the landlords have? And even for this new change where it now tells the tenant that you have to give it to me in writing that you want to come back into the unit, but the landlord has to give them now 60 days. So, hey, the unit's going to be completed. Now I have to wait 60 days until you give notice elsewhere to move back into your unit, not to mention the funds that you had to give the tenant in order to leave. So they see that you want us to build, but you're restricting us on building. It's obviously going to leave an open wound to where people are going to potentially get caught in not doing the proper protocols. And now would this now be considered bad faith? So now when they go, okay, you got N12s, I got to make sure I move in a certain time frame. You now have to tell me you're moving in within 60 days, and I got to keep you in the loop of what's happening with the renovations. And if I don't, and you don't get notified, if you don't update us, and I never got that email, now it could be considered bad faith. And they have taken the fine for bad faith evictions from $50,000 to $100,000 for an individual, and then $100,000 for a corporation, up to, or 500 for it was $250 for a corporation, up to $500,000 for a corporation.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they're proud that they have the highest fees in the country to penalize their investors who are trying to help them build supply.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. I will admit, Kayla, it's kind of bizarre. I don't like, and this is the thing. I know of a property inside Hamilton, where the landlord was doing N13s, right? The previous one, and they weren't able to clear the property. And ultimately, what happened was it was a 40-unit property, and it only had 10 tenants in it. So they couldn't get what they needed to do the rental, so they sold it. The new landlord came along, tried to get the remaining tenants out of there for permits, wasn't successful, sold it again. The next landlord came along, try to do the same thing, sold again. So they went through 5 landlords in 8 years on that property, and the tenants are still having the same maintenance issues from 8 years ago. And how does that happen? Well, the landlord is not getting the benefit. And that's the repercussion, right? The response to that is, well, we can force the landlord to make the repairs. And what they're seeing is the market just saying, okay, cool, I'll sell it. I'll sell it to someone who's going to, take the issue, hold on to the property, hold it for a couple of years, and then get their minor amount in the equity increase, and then sell it anyways.
Yeah.
And you're seeing that turnover. Because that's what's, they're not, if you are going to repair that property, there has to be an incentive for the landlord to actually do it. Otherwise, it makes no cost-benefit analysis corrections. Like it just doesn't make any sense for them on a cost basis to repair those units. It just doesn't.
The tenants are now concerned at this section. They're like, well, I'm not going to get any repairs now, right? And that's where, in a fair world, if you were going to do these type of renovations, it's almost like the N10, where you're going to be able to negotiate a rent increase based on, here's all my paperwork of how much I charge, with my expenses to do these type of renovations. And this is where we think that this could be a fair rent increase, because you get to enjoy it, right? It needs to make the sense. It need to have the incentivize, and they need to have more programs to incentivize landlords to even want to partner with the municipalities in providing housing. They're desperate for landlords to join them, be part of a head lease, where the city is the person who's on title. They're going to guarantee the rent. They've got $10,000 worth of damages. They're doing anything in their power now to work with landlords. And we keep explaining to them, it's great, we want to help, but unfortunately, when we have to wait 12 months in order to deal with this, and this could be another thing, Andrew, when it comes down to to our lease terms. You have a yearly and you have monthly. Yearly means nothing because then it goes month to month. It does more protection for the tenants. But if you had something where, hey, after a year, we get to reevaluate what we plan to do with the rental property if we needed to do renovations for that time frame, and that can give that tenant some idea when they should be looking for a new accommodations. But unfortunately, they know that the supply is not there.
Is that a, like, I'm just speaking out loud here, you know, is it a controversial statement to say I want to be able to end a tenancy in Ontario for whatever reason I want, right? I can understand, let's say, if you know, you wouldn't be allowed to do it over 20 units, but let's say you were a single landlord with 5 units, 6 units, that kind of thing. Why can't I just end a tenancy? I'll concede whatever time frame. Maybe I have to give 2 years notice, 3 years notice. Maybe that's the case, right? But I can't end my tenancy, right? If you walked into any retail store and you asked, can I have this product, and they didn't shelve it anymore, you know, tough luck. That's the way it works. If the supplier doesn't want to do it anymore, they don't have to. How come you are locked into these leases for an indefinite period of time when you no longer want to be a landlord and you no longer want to provide a service to that individual anymore? I just don't understand it. And I don't understand how that's a controversial subject. I really don't.
Andrew, you can't get out of it when you want to say, okay, I got this house. The tenant just caused a whole bunch of damage. I need to renovate it to sell it. Now you got to what? Do the N13, but then also serve them an N12 at the same time to say after the renovations it's being sold, but it's got to be sold to an owner who's going to occupy the property. Like, this is where they have you, like the government literally took your properties. They're literally evicting the landlords out of the real estate market. And if they want to be the full housing providers of Ontario, you know, let us know, but inform the taxpayers first, because I don't think they're going to be very happy with the concept that the need for government housing is going to grow exponentially because of the changes that are happening. And it's all through bad policies from the federal government to the provincial government, municipal government. The changes are absolutely ridiculous. And this is why you're going to see more of our landlords. And I apologize for people commenting there, because I had it on another area. I didn't see the comments coming in, but we have people like ready out of the market, already moving their money out of Ontario. People were talking about leaving their units empty quite a bit since the pandemic, and that's when they came into a vacancy tax, and then have stipulations. Oh, someone had to die, or someone it was in an estate. Like, they're really controlling what we're doing with our own property, right down to even short-term rentals. And short-term fits for a lot of people who are in transitioning into long-term housing or ready to, you know, have their own house that they have. But they're definitely making more of a mess with this. And this is the big one that I found very like with the change with the air conditioners. We're going to help our tenants. We're strengthening the protection for our tenants by allowing you to have an air conditioner. And then you need to inform your landlord in writing, and you also need to provide that type of information on what system you're putting into into the unit, calculating how much energy that equipment could be used. I guess being on 24/7, 7 days a week. I don't know how we're going to be able to determine that. And what's going to happen when you find out that it's installed wrong and then it falls, and now we have, you know, a situation when someone has been injured, or worst case death, because the tenant had put in an air conditioner in, and now we have to keep coming back to making sure that it was installed. Do they think we work for free? Like, that's called slavery, dude. Like, we have to work for something going on here.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's a great thing to bring up. And I was around when that law came into effect regarding the air conditioners, because unfortunately, you know, we saw in Toronto, my brother actually lives near the property where the air conditioner had fallen from, I believe it was a Metro housing building, and the air conditioner fell and it hit a stroller and, you know, unfortunately killed the child. Terrible thing to hear. And we just saw an overnight sort of law change that just completely changed the landscape on air conditioning on every unit, everywhere, right? And in even other provinces as well. And you know, sometimes there needs to be something unfortunate like that to happen for people to actually take a mind that there's clearly an issue, right? And when these things happen, and I can see the comments coming in, what sort of liability of what sort of occurs when that happens, and it's like, unfortunately, it's the landlord.
It's on our property. Just like if you have a dog and the dog bites someone on your property, so you have to make sure you have a sign that says keep your dogs on a leash at all times. And it's ridiculous to see they make changes, allow tenants to do things. And that's what we call it. Like when I was listening to the announcement, they had the mayor of London. He said, we're very serious about the Landlord and Tenant Act. And I'm like, okay, tells me that you're serious. It's called the Residential Tenancies Act, but okay. Thanks for calling it that way, because it's more on the concept that it's the tenants have rights and the landlords just have responsibilities. The landlords have lost their rights in Ontario. We have been screaming from the rooftop for almost 14 years now in July, trying to help them create a better system at the Landlord Tenant Board to streamline the top applications that are bogging down the system, to get better training to their adjudicators in order to be able to rule precisely and have these orders that should not be taking 60 days. Like, set the example of what's happening in Newfoundland. Their order is one page, very simple. And it could be written up at the time of hearing, especially since they have the evidence 7 days prior to. But we have to be doing more, and we're trying to learn what the government has, what programs they have, what could help tenants in order to help avoid them from being evicted. It's not about there, but again, every article's been out there now about rent control. They said thanks for the air conditioning, but we want full rent control. And that they obviously know it's going to be a disaster in Ontario for any type of rent control. That's why it's only
that'd be a terrible decision. That would be an absolutely terrible decision. And even if I was a renter, right, and I'm no longer a renter, but most likely
he'll come back.
I would be petrified to see to effect. I really would, because I would know what would happen to the market, and I would just see all the other rents just skyrocket to the highest extent, and then the housing stock disappear overnight, right? And that's what we would see happen. So, why move on to a subject or an idea that we've seen and proven to see that it's always been a detriment to the market as a whole? The problem is we don't have enough buildings. We don't have enough units. So as of right now, flood the market with more units immediately. That's what you need to do. You need to be building fast, quickly, right? And
Andrew, they won't even let you have a secondary suite in your basement if you didn't have enough parking. Well, it forces the landlord to cater to someone that doesn't have a car if you allow them to do it. But they are like this NIMBYism that they have, or just the restrictions of having it. There's developments trying to provide 453 townhouses in our city, and they're preventing them from doing that as well, because the infrastructure obviously can't even keep up with these type of developments. So it's a broken system all around. The landlords are obviously understanding that the provincial government is just trying to throw money. I would like an audit to find out where this money's going and if it's worth it before you spend any more taxpayers' dollars into putting that in there. But deep down, the landlords are either A, they're getting out of the business, or B, they're going to make sure that it's very, very difficult for tenants to go through a screening process before they allow them to get into their unit. They're definitely on the verge of making sure that they're holding multiple people accountable now, asking more for like not just a tenant, but having a guarantor to be a part of that rental application. And tenants are not really moving either, when they see the type of rents that are skyrocketing. So when they do leave the rental property, the landlords are now going to have to jump that increase on that rental rate because they don't know how long that tenant's going to be there. So they have to jump it. And guess what? They're going to pay for it because it is a housing crisis. So they've created this. Every situation that's happening now is all through bad policy, mismanagement of this housing crisis, and downright neglect. And when you have the ombudsman actively investigating them for 3 years, and they're supposed to be coming out with their report. And I think this is why all these changes are now happening, because this report is supposed to be coming out based on what the findings were with the ombudsman. But landlords, we have to now cut back. You know what I mean? It's just like any business. When you start to see changes like this, and your interest rates are obviously rising, and your utilities are rising, what can we do now as we have turnover with our rental units? Maybe we're not providing fridge, stoves, washer, and dryers in these units anymore. Maybe we should be putting this on a concept where it's a separate contract outside of your lease. You're renting the equipment off of me, or you have to provide your own. If it's about providing 2-car parking, but only one's included within the lease, the other one's going to be a separate contract where that price can fluctuate yearly. And then the most important one, I wanted you to come on and explain to us about the above the guideline rent increases, because
Yeah.
in the city of Cambridge, it's now 4.2 just for the city portion, not including the region. So what is going to be considered allowed in order for us to apply to the board? Mind you, it's about $200, might take 2 years, but the landlords should be exercising their rights to apply to the board to raise the rent above the guidelines. Like, what do the landlords have to do, and what would qualify them to get approved if that's the route that they want to go to?
Yeah, and if you're in the unfortunate position of doing an AGI, I would sincerely, like, I don't like doing AGIs, just being full disclosure. Like, I absolutely hate them. Not in the sense of the actual practicality of doing an AGI. It's just the issue is that, if you're trying to eke out as much of the profit as you possibly can, the problem is that the AGI takes 2 years. So what I have to tell every client is, unfortunately, I'll submit it for you, but, see you in a couple of years, maybe 3, maybe 2, we don't know, right? And, that's the way it sort of goes, right? And it's just a lot of the same thing, right? Very unfortunate. I'm sorry that this is it's going to take this long, but you don't have any other route, right? If you can't do the renovation, if you can't do the N13, then unfortunately, if you you put $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 into your property, then you're going to only be able to eke out a very small percentage, and then maybe that happens in a couple of years. And you sincerely hope that you have a turnover in one of your units where you can actually get that change go through. But apart from that, you're kind of left with your own devices at that point.
And now, if I'm at a 4.2%, would that, just in the property tax increase alone, would that grant me to be able to get my above the guideline rent increase at the board?
I mean, you can try, but it's still going to be very difficult, right? Like, your increase on your taxes is usually, when they provide the AGI, it's going to be based off of the cost and change that you've placed into the property. So, like, you're doing your renovations on the roof, the boiler system, the heaters, electric, ESA permits are being done for your knob and tube to be removed, all these other things. But your tax portion, yes, it can give you some, but not everything. So
no, it's just taxes and obviously expenses too, trying to figure out exactly what would cover it, and seeing if you can get approved. And it's part of the administration, like, I should be able to apply for it. Here's my information. Here's a checkbox. This is my information. There's a nice package for you. Look through it, and it should be spit out. No hearing needed to be able to go through this type of increase. But again, we want to be able to start captivating on whatever increase we can do at this time, because obviously the turnover is not happening, or you're capped out at 2.5%.
Yeah, and what you're seeing, the long term, like, I mean, at this point, there's no real significant amount of people that are looking at rental units at short term, right? Everyone's looking at long term. Every tenant is looking at long term. Every tenant is looking at 10, 15 years, because there's just no other stock out there, right? So if you're renting in there, you can expect that your tenant is not going to have any plans to leave for several years. That's just the reality of it. And the interest rates and the expenses for landlords are just increasing every year consistently. And I don't see where this goes, apart from a total collapse in trust in the system, right? And trust in the tribunal, and trust in the ability of a landlord to actually make profit and just make their ends meet, right?
collapse is here, Andrew. The collapse is here. You
Yeah,
know it. Like you
yeah,
can't, when you have students living in shelters, when you have people from Ukraine wanting to move back to Ukraine because they can't find housing here in the KW area, this is a crisis. And this is where they have to prevent more and more people from coming over here if you do not have the housing to house them. Because when you look at the violence that's happening in Toronto, you see 5% now, another 5% increase just on our food prices of produce, on meat. Like this is now coming into hard times where people are resulting into crime, right? So we have to kind of, they have to come out with something better than what they have. And I think if any of our elected officials are watching this video, understand that you're on a time ticking bomb right now. Are these landlords leaving? And we need to get them more inclined to working with the province to get this type of supply happening before their money's leaving. And you can see through the comments here. And if anyone's watching live or after, if you are investing in other countries and stopped in Ontario, please put where you're investing, because we're going to have another guest coming on telling us about how they're investing into Dominican and Mexico, because I think a lot more people are moving there too. It's not just for the investments; they're trying to move there.
yeah,
And just to touch on our federal government, how they've issued out this $500 rent assistance for people, all of like apply $500. Like, why are you just offering it out to everyone? Like, why can't you just put it in a bank to give it to people who are actually in need of this type of money? And again, it shows the inefficiencies within their system and wasteful spending of our government. And I would hate to back down from this fight, but how much more can we do? And even if I even ran for council or for elected position, I'd be bounded because I'd be a conflict of interest. And you can see there was a letter in the, I think it was Toronto Sun, of how many MPPs are actually landlords themselves.
yeah,
So it's shocking to see that it's not a landlord and tenant situation. Landlords and tenants should be coming together, because just like this air conditioning thing, yes, it's great for you, but it also opens you up for potentially an N5 application, bringing you to the Landlord and Tenant Board because you didn't do a certain thing on your air conditioner. So it opens you up there, and two, it's going to allow these landlords to say, okay, if my plans are to renovate, I might just, pay the vacancy tax if it's in that city, just so I don't have to deal with the red tape and the restrictions of trying to do these renovations. And I'm not going to demo the building. I'm just going to, do whatever I can just to, let it float right now with what's working, but I'm not going to put the effort in. Like, you're getting sticky tile instead of ceramic tile. Like you're going to see the effects of these bad policies, evicting these landlords out of the market.
yeah. And I don't see an end in sight as of yet. To be honest with you, I just don't. I mean, in my opinion, like the best thing I could see is just that we're just getting the the board time frame down. I like, to me, that's my biggest push.
Yep.
And I do think I'm a little bit biased. I think you should run for office. I really do think you should do it, right? You've been advocating for this many years.
Conflict of interest.
Hey man, I still think you should do it. Like, it would work out well. And it's like, this is the thing. It's like, we're still like, if we could just get the board timeline down, a lot of these issues can be alleviated, right? And then eventually we can have more housing stock. Eventually we can have all these other things where we're actually seeing, like, I feel like that's like a baseline between tenants and landlords, where can we just come on one topic where it's obviously the wait is just too long. It's just too long. Let's meet in the middle somewhere.
If it's long, but just like when I speak to some elected officials, they're like, but then the tenants are going to become homeless if we speed up the Landlord and Tenant Board. I'm like, you're stopping the inevitable here, but that's why your programs, you're Lutherwood, you're OW, you're like, people on OW and ODSP are being massively discriminated against because of how much money they're making on the system. And our elected officials are trying to up that cost to help people afford these type of units that are out there. But that baseline for a 1-bedroom unit in my area that they consider to be affordable is at that $1,300 mark. And unfortunately, the 1-bedrooms now here in the area around that $1,500 mark. And they have portable housing benefits. So when you look at our social agencies, they go to our council and they say, you know, we have X amount of people on the housing waiting list. And then they go back the next year and they go, oh, we're down. But are they really down? They're not really quite down, because when you can say to someone that's on the waiting list saying, hey, it's going to take 12 years, or I can give you $350 as a portable housing benefit to take your name off the list, but your name is taken off the list. We have 40% of the people living in our shelter are seniors in Cambridge. Seniors. Like, this is where it breaks my heart. And this is why people say, hey, you know, I'm not all for like the whole landlord side of things. I have to get myself into how I am as a taxpayer, what we're doing to our seniors, and how are we going to be able to accommodate their needs, because we don't even have units that are accessible. So it's even to the supply, but they're not even grasping what these tenants are needing. But no one is caring about that homeless population, only when it's an encampment and it's now causing a scene within the downtown core. But we also are not seeing that there is people at truck stops who are living in their car, and they're living in trailers at these truck stops. So we are be able to help you. We can joint venture with us. Like, tell me what property that the city has right now that we can bring some investors in there, you know, create this type of development in order to get more units built. But they don't have it. They don't have a program that's like that to work with the private investors. And until they do, they are not going to get their 1.5 million homes, and they're not going to be able to get the housing units, because not everyone could be a homeowner. And that's the stupid thing that they have, is that, you know, we want to get more people being homeowners. Like, well, you got to have the down deposit, you got to have the good credit, you got to make sure that you have a good job, because the banks ain't going to look at you that way. So we have to understand that there is people that are going to be stuck in that rental industry for their entire life. And we have to look at the way that the government is running their own government housing, because we have people in government housing, they're there for life. It's like there's no incentives for these people to go out. And that's where I spoke with my elected officials to say, if you have someone in government housing and they could be getting a good job, once they go in there or they meet a spouse, but they don't leave, they just start paying market rent. We want to move those people out, but they can't because they have bad credit. So I said, why aren't you reporting the good payment history to Front Lobby? You know, help them build their credit at the same time, to incentivize them to leave government housing so that it's available for people who are able, that have more complex needs. And landlords out there, you have a tenant that is abusing the system, not paying rent on time, not paying their utilities, report it to frontlobby.com. You have your tax write-off, pay for it. We pay $186 right now just for an application at the Landlord Tenant Board. Utilize that tool when you're screening your tenants, when you're walking them through the property, to say, hey, also, I do monthly rent reporting to Equifax and Landlord Credit Bureau through Front Lobby. This can help you build your credit, or it can impact your credit. Put it right on your ad. We don't need to be, we want to be able to help, but if you're not willing to listen to us, then we just have to look out for the well-being of our business that we've been trying to get as a retirement plan. It's not a get rich quick scheme, but making sure that everyone is signing up with frontlobby.com. You can use the discount code OLW15. You get $15 credit when you first sign up to use it. You don't even have to be a premium member to use their credit check services. But our landlords, start using our credit checks. This is not the time to skip a process. And we have to do whatever we can to make the numbers work so that we can gain a little bit of cash flow in order to jump over to Mexico or Dominican or Thailand or wherever we are. Because if they don't want us here in Ontario, let's get some education on where people can invest and how easy it is.
Hey, my money ticket's on Alberta and Africa. So you know what? You got to look at those different markets at this point. That's what it's looking at, right? And the big thing with me is that I am not going to make myself my own client. I'm not going to do it, right?
Mm.
And if I'm looking at my best bet, I'm not looking in Ontario right now. I'm looking somewhere else. That's what I'm looking at. If I'm looking at a market where I have the best bang for my buck and I can protect my investment, it's not going to be in Ontario. I won't do it.
Well, Alberta's been the place that we've been, if we're keeping it Canadian, we're going to Alberta. They don't have rent control. They're like, you breached your contract. It's based on contract. Everyone loved Alberta, but they now want to do a landlord registry in Alberta. So it's like, okay, like, are you trying to create, a housing crisis? Are you trying to get rid of your supply there? So I want to be able to like follow, if you guys are wanting to know which accounts to follow on LinkedIn from our elected officials, making sure you're commenting your thoughts on this current bill 97, because obviously it's not enough. Like we're tired of pennies. We need some dollars to be actually spent, and make it worth it for them to put this to pen to paper, and spend everyone's time going through it. And just like these programs that they create, it's like, are you inviting the landlords to this table? No. So we'll keep fighting the way that I've been doing it now. I'm still trying to get my MPP with the Minister of Housing, obviously his assistant. We have a new one, Tanya Tangria. I they switch out their assistants to the Minister of Housing like more times than I can imagine. It's hard to even catch up with one. And then you tell them all the problems, and then they're like, okay, we'll work on it. And then they're out and we got a new one in. So you can even see the inconsistencies just at the provincial level, not including the regional level, where people are in contracts and they're not able to be productive, or these subcommittees or the committees within your city to help with creating affordable housing and dealing with the homelessness. It's that, you're spinning your wheels. There's so many layers to try to get the voices heard. And this is where we have too many cooks in the kitchen and everything is getting burnt. So I'm really hoping for everyone to be very positive into their comments, to be respectful, but definitely reach out to all of the elected officials, from Doug Downey, Steve Clark. We have to get your local MPP. Doesn't matter if they're green, blue, purple. I do think that party politics really does impact our ability to be able to create proper policies, because everyone's afraid to implement different changes, because they know their critics are going to be there to make them try to look bad. And it's all about the votes. And they think tenants are all about the votes, but we're trying to educate our tenants that when the government comes down and they have something that says that, hey, we're here to protect a tenant, just know that it does have a very sour taste to that. And it's not going to be protecting the tenants, because it's eventually going to be landing in their laps, and they're going to feel the symptoms of a bad policy. Just like this air conditioner, very great, it can now issue you out to be an N5 application. Like water billing, it's great that your landlord has it in your contract where you have to pay it, but now they can kick you out if you don't pay your water bill. Little things like that is what's going to really impact everybody's abilities. I'm going to see if we can read the comments here. No, you're driving there. What'd you say, Andrew?
I said, my apologies. The internet here is a little bit spotty. But it's gonna be a shame where if we're gonna consistently see the same basis that we were back in 2015, 2016, 18, 19, 2021, 2022, and 2023. We should definitely see a change here where we're going to be being proactive, where landlords can finally get, not the cake and eat it too, but just let's be able to manage the housing stock the same. Let's be consistent here. And we're just not seeing it just yet.
Even for when you have the type of way that they're trying to do things, and they're moving it, it's not moving it fast enough, and they're not able to justify the money to be spent there. They don't have proper training. They don't have a third party intervening to say, this is where you're going wrong, this is where you need to change it. They just think that what they've done, like just like that foreign buyer policy, they had to make amendments. Why? Because it actually did more damage than it did good. So you get to see how we have people of power that have no clue what it's really like within the industry, and understanding that there's multiple needs to the community and they're not able to get them. Before we go, we had Mary. She said, there she goes. Why do you prefer front lobby over rent check? Front lobby is the part where you're getting your long form Equifax credit checks, very easy to read. The key part of front lobby is being able to report to Landlord Credit Bureau and Equifax monthly. And you can also do it for past tenants going back 6 years. And it's a trade line. Pay attention to the trade lines. Not everyone is doing trade lines. Front lobby is the only one in Canada right now that's able to do a trade line in order to impact a tenant's credit on Equifax. And when you work with Rent Check, it's just you're doing the credit check to the companies in itself, but you're also just having the database of just Rent Check. So that's why I definitely I've met them all, talked to them all. And that's why after meeting with all of them, that's why I want to make sure I tell everybody about front lobby.
Front lobby is still my go-to with every client. It's still the same thing I'm telling every investor that they should be taking a look at. Ultimately speaking, it's still the best option that I'm seeing as well.
I have Andrade. Do you have any basis to the new housing bill? So in the link, we put all the details to Bill 97. So you can get to see on the first read there so that you can see what they're proposing. Obviously, we did it in a nutshell. We have obviously making it a little bit more difficult for the N12, N13, and obviously to demo your property, as well as the fines. The fines are a little heftier. You know why? Because we have other groups on Facebook and people would say, hey, just lock them out, 50,000, like, hey, it's who cares? It makes sense when you look at the tenant not getting a hearing, right? And they said, okay, we heard you. Now we're going to make sure that it's $100,000 fine for you now if you try to do an unlawful eviction, right? And I don't think a lot of these landlords do it. They're very much business oriented, but it comes down to knowing that it's a crisis. If one individual is going to do that to another individual and actually locking them out. So we have to be determined that this is bad. And this is why I was very discouraged to see that they were very proud that they have the highest fines in Ontario. And literally that's a trademark right there. Like, don't come to Ontario to invest your money right now. You have to be very vocal on telling us what we need. We need the N4 applications from not being heard automatically from an adjudicator. They have to streamline that, and they have to do a streamlined approach for the N12 applications. So when you speak with your elected officials, demand those two things. I've been doing it for 14 years. I gave them 20 issues. It goes over their head. We're going on 2 things now, guys. Like N4, L2, that's your problem. Why are you guys dealing with this? You're supposed to be a tribunal to deal with disputes. There's nothing to dispute when a tenant has not paid rent, and there's nothing to dispute when the landlord does want to move into the place and they can prove it with their evidence or with their affidavits. Why are we preventing the landlords from taking over their own personal property? And tenants are just now using it as a delay tactic just to go to the Landlord Tenant Board because they know it's going to take that long. And they continue to keep doing this, like if everyone's saying in the comments, like they're moving their money out of Canada. So Matt Bichet had a great video talking about why he's no longer investing into Canada, and he has a huge following. So more and more people are catching on to what people are doing, and this is going to be catastrophic, not only to the landlords and the tenants within here, but our taxpayers, when they're going to be the ones who are going to be coughing up more and more in order to house people, because they say housing is a right. They're not saying what kind of housing, but making sure that you guys are being loud. Get into these groups, talk about it, be very precise on what you're asking for. We're done complaining. This is about using your voice now for the solution. Share this video with your elected officials and make sure that you are able to keep your nose clean, making sure that you're following all the rules and regulations. And I'm here. Everyone knows you can find me on Facebook. You can message me there. I can jump on a call with you guys. I love being able to help you out individually based on your situation, because not everything is jump to the Landlord Tenant Board right now. Sometimes just that customer service level that we can provide to our tenants to keep the peace. And it's almost mediation, teaching you a little bit of mediation so that the board doesn't have to do anything. But elections are going to be coming, they're going to be coming, and we have to be very cautious on who we're electing in because from all levels, it's broken.
Very much so. Very much so.
Andrew, I can't thank you enough for even taking the time to join me in your car. I definitely have, I'm going to be with the Canadian Real Estate Women Association now next Friday. So hopefully I can do a live at their event. So I'll try to put that in the chat here after the video, so you guys can join me in Mississauga now next Friday. And then we're going to have Lena. She's coming on the 21st. We're going to be talking about a program. It's not really a program, it's a service. It's a service that she's created that I think is amazing, that every landlord would want to be a part of for many different reasons. But my key one is almost safety. So it's going to be exciting to be able to have her on to explain her information. I have Andrew's link that I'm putting in here now. So if you want to talk to Andrew, he is amazing. He's helped me through my fiascos that I went through, even with the fire department. And I love you for that, because that was it was definitely a crazy, crazy time. And we'll keep you in the loop. Keep following the page, Ontario Landlords Watch page. Subscribe to the YouTube channel that you are that we have posted in the link there. And if you have a meeting coming up with your elected official and you want me to be a part of it, please let me know. But we're the landlords of Ontario, big or small. We're the ones that are going to be able to help. But if they don't want our help, we'll let you know where to be investing next. So, Andrew, thank you so much for being on. And I want to thank everyone for watching. And I can't wait to be in person with everybody. And I think we're going to be able to do this as often as I possibly can to keep you guys updated. And I love how you guys are talking in the group. It's definitely a group about being connected to each other, to help one another, and keep the advocacy alive. It's something that we have to continue to keep doing, and just know that it's all politics. It's all about votes. We're not going to get it in courts. We're not going to get it as a class action lawsuit. I've been down this road, talked to many, many lawyers. Our job is to be being loud, being vocal, and making sure that we're giving them solutions, not just the complaints. And I hopefully will keep adding more people into the group. And if you ever have an issue, please just reach out to me. It's definitely something that I take great pride in, to make sure that we're providing great service and great education to our members. And I look forward to letting you know about any future meetings that I have coming up with our elected officials, and I'll keep guiding them as much as I possibly can. I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make it drink, right? So keep doing what you're doing. And I want to thank everyone for watching. Until we do this again, thank you for being a part of Ontario Landlords Watch.